Looks like one. Is that Mike?
Is that Barb?
Huh. Call the March 2nd Common Council meeting order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Olson?
Here.
Alderman Dandria?
Here.
Alderman Mayor?
Here.
Alderwoman Wilhelm?
Here.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Here.
Alderman Barber? Alderman Nelson?
Here. Alderman Barber is on the phone. Please rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alderman Barber, would you grace us with a here? All right. The record reflected Alderman Barber is not on the phone. So, okay. Given that, we have roll call. We have a quorum, please. Next item is citizens' comment period. Any citizen wishing to speak, please rise, come forward, give us your name and address, and tell us what you want to tell us.
Shelley Tessmer, 6809 South 27th Street, Franklin. Thank you for having me on your agenda. For the record, dear members of the Common Council, I'm asking you please consider the below points I've learned during my research, as well as to allow experienced consultants' guidance towards your decisions on the future direction for the parcel on 27th Street. I'm also requesting permission to apply for grant funds on behalf of the city for project development, or to apply the funds that will assess the land viability should the council have no desire to assist with the cost to secure. Since your last vote directing staff to look into land lease options that could bring Franklin residents their first dog park, I've noted the city's current business models cost taxpayers money each year. What I've been proposing to the Park Commission is a recreational income resource for Franklin. The proposed dormant land near 27th Street deserves detailed consideration. Insight into understanding future land use for it as a community resource or as a future taxable development parcel is before you. Either study outcomes provide a great benefit or could provide a benefit to the city. Speculations on the reliability of the EPA and DNR's data are high, but I think we can agree fears should be grounded by viable data. When taking into consideration a consultant study, the below points will give a clearer understanding of the highest and best use of the site would be obtained. I've recently identified a land reuse and development grant that can make this a very cost-effective kickoff project. The site is a solution to finding an area with little opposition to barking dogs and traffic. The site already has fencing and parking, both a huge cost saving to other park ideas. The site as a dog park does not take land off the tax roll since it's been untaxed for many years. Current tax revenue is $2.30 on 11 acres. The site has a sidewalk available for residents to safely walk their dogs to the park. The site has an asphalt parking lot for the residents. And then there has been a noise impact study done on the model dog park that shows traffic noise buffers barking dog noise. It also has a commercial real estate or retail stores 1 block away from it. This would be beneficial to increase patrons to those businesses as well. It also has a wetland and creek behind it that can be very scenic. Currently, the Wisconsin DNR and EPA are behind the land reuse approval by the way of a 2005 consent order. The documents available have already cleared the site for reuse as green space. Following best practices of the model dog park, I've been researching, which obtains and supports an annual budget of $84,000 on just 3 acres. They have 700 members who pay a monthly membership. They have a 1-year waiting list to obtain an entry key fob. I have received a quote from KEI, studied website information on the City of West Dallas Dog Park, visited the Milwaukee County 26-acre dog park in Oak Creek, and now I challenge the Common Council to join me in research that will bring Franklin what dog lovers have been requesting for years and to turn the park expense model into a revenue source to lower the burden on our Franklin DPW and the tax-paying residents. Please help us obtain a comfort level related to compliance needs or changes needed in reference to the parcel on 27th Street. I do have some photos for you, if they didn't come out, of the model dog park, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Tessmer. We do also have your 25 pages in each of the alderman's packet. We do have another letter from Ms. Dana Gint, Set Your Places. If anyone's interested in reading it in the record, they may, but it's there for you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else? Seeing no one else rise, I'll close the citizen comment period. We move on to approval of the regular Common Council meeting minutes of February 15th. Any additions or corrections? Is there a motion to approve? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is organizational business. This is my appointment of Gene Nineman again for a calendar year appointment as weed commissioner. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, it's a roll call for an appointment. Madam Clerk.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor. Aye. Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries 5 ayes, no noes, 1 absent, no abstentions. Move on to letters and petitions. Ms. Tessmer has her packet, and we've included it in the letters and petitions as well. Reports and recommendations, consent agenda, item G1. Is there any request for separate action?
Move to approve.
Second.
Hey, Mike. Hey, let the record reflect that Alderman Barber is with us at, Mike, I'm going to say 6:35. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. G2 on page 67, request for spending authority for the civic celebrations activities. Mr. Bergner is here to answer any questions. John? I will say that Monday on the ICC agenda, I'm hoping that we'll have the mayors and village presidents to discuss this. Mr. Bergner.
Hello, everyone. I, John Bergner, Chairman of the Franklin Civic Celebration Commission, request authority to sign tentative contracts and agreements to hold a 2021 Franklin Civic Celebration this year. The dates and times would be Friday, July 2nd, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., Saturday, July 3rd, 1 p.m. to 11 p.m., and if you have the notes, on Sunday, it's July 4th from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. With your approval, I request authority to sign these contracts and authorize deposits for the following amounts given to you. Any questions?
Fireworks budget, 1 night or 2?
I just have a question. Do you had a question?
1 night or 2?
3 nights,
Fireworks,
1 night.
1 night doubled up.
Yeah,
Come on, I'm the fireworks guy.
better fireworks even this year, but we thought it'd be better to do it just 1 night.
Okay, that's the 16.5.
That's the 16.5, yeah.
Alderman Wilhelm.
I would just want to make sure that you have the clause about cancellation. Could you just make sure that the city attorney or someone in the legal department's okay with whatever the contract has?
Yes, because a lot of these contracts had to be turned over from last year to this year. So, yes,
Mr. Mayor,
we're putting addendums on these contracts saying it's all dependent on whether we have the event or not.
Alderman Mayor.
I'm figuring that the member or representative from the Civics and Celebrations Committee is probably going to want to move this forward. I would like to second the motion at that time, and I think we're all hoping for positive outcomes here. I think, especially with some of the things we're going to approve tonight, hopefully by then things will be in a more positive light. So I'd like to second the motion when it comes up.
Would that be the motion that I'm going to make?
It's quite possible.
Thank you, Alderwoman Hanneman. Any other discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those this, by the way, we got to say it though. Things can change. We're going to plan to go ahead, but it may not be that way.
Correct.
All those in favor of the motion to
Can we hear the motion that I seconded first?
I move, I gladly move to allow John Bergner to execute contracts and agreements for the 2021 Franklin Civic Celebration event.
and Alderman Mayor seconded. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, John.
G3 on page 69, authorization to allow the Health Services Director to enter into a contract with Milwaukee County to use the county sports complex for a COVID-19 vaccination site. No cost to us except for any extraneous.
So moved.
Second.
Before we vote on this is not a promise to do this. We only get 100 vaccines a week. Kind of hard to run a mass clinic with 100 vaccines. But if things happen,
Just like the 4th, we're trying to stay positive.
that's correct. Madam Director, do you have anything to add? Courtney?
Yeah, just that if vaccine allocation is what we anticipate, we are hoping to possibly be over there the week of March 15th.
And this is what other communities?
I'll be with Greenfield, Greendale, and Hills Corners,
Zone D. Questions?
Zone D.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Day.
Before she goes, I got a question.
Courtney?
Yep, I'm still here.
Courtney, can you elaborate on the number of vaccinations you will have available, or you anticipate?
So that week of March 15th, we should be getting an increase in allocations, as that was the week that was earmarked by the state to increase our vaccine to bring in educators and daycare providers. So we'll have that allocation plus our normal weekly allocation. So we're hoping for then at least those next 4 weeks that we will have enough to be doing hopefully around 600 to 1,000 a day would be what we're hoping, and we're hoping to run 2 clinics a week there.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you, Courtney. G4 is a resolution conditionally approving a 2-lot certified survey map in the shops at Franklin at Wyndham Village. Alderman Mayor.
Yeah, could we get Heath or Glenn to give us just an overview of this, exactly what is happening and what the intention is there? I really don't have any issue with it, just want to know a little bit more clearly than the write-up.
And there is a representative from the applicant here. Hold on.
Yeah, Brian Randall's here representing the applicant. The reason for this is to basically create a lot around the existing pick and save over at the shops at Wyndham Village. And primarily that's to provide them with the flexibility to be able to sell the property to pick and save so that they can own their property rather than have a lease operation on the property. But it also gives them just general flexibility to be able to do that. The Plan Commission at their meeting approved a land division variance to be able to allow that lot to be created without having to create lot frontage along either roadway in order to do that, either Drexel or Lover's Lane, Highway 100, along the logic of everything's internally eased so that everybody has cross-access easements, so they have access anyway, so the lot frontages are not necessary. If you want to ask specifically as to the motivation of the applicant, Brian probably could handle that question better than I could, but it's basically to give them flexibility.
Okay, and it's the the outlots there that are already there that you can see on Drexel, but it's also to the south of Pick and Save, to the wooded area?
It basically wraps around, it includes the parking area in front of the building, wraps around the side of the building, the area closest to the learning experience property, and then wraps around the building to include the area parking immediately behind the building and the loading docks of the Pick and Save property, and then joins up and links with the property currently owned by the Target Corporation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G5 is a request for common council input on where we go with the Unified Development Ordinance update. This is on page 115. Mr. Eddy, you're on. Mark, what's your button?
Okay. So I've drafted up a lovely slideshow, but we can do this a number of ways. We can,
800 pages?
no, not quite that much. I got a lovely picture at the end that I'll show you. I start out with the very basics, and I'm sort of at the mile-high level here, then I get down to about 1,500 feet, and then I go down a little bit further. It's meant to address the appendix at the back end of the memo that was attached to the action sheet so that you have an idea as to what we're doing here. Staff has been talking about this for years. I know my predecessor did about 6 years ago, and it didn't quite get there, but we're working on it now. It's in our budget for this year to start this process. And the whole idea is to try to modernize the UDO, bring it into the 21st century, modernize a lot of techniques, revise a lot of things, make some changes to how we do things. And that's partially because of a need to do so we can match what we're trying to do economic development-wise with what we're trying to do in terms of development review to make it as efficient as possible. And also because seeing that we're probably not going to have staff increases anywhere in the near future, it just makes it simply much more efficient for staff to have a more modern ordinance, which is easier to interpret, easier to implement. The Plan Commission reviewed the series of recommendations staff provided at their February 4th meeting, and to consider the scope, the time frame, and the potential for consultant assistance on this versus a staff internal effort. We evaluated 3 possible options in terms of the scope of work for this. One was just to simply adjust and modernize the language of the UDO. This thing here, this 600-plus page document, to make it more effective. 2 is a full rewrite, which would involve analyzing everything, districts, uses, procedures, everything in that thing would be subject to review. And then choice number 3, which was to simply light that with a match and then start over. Well, start over and then light that with a match. The Plan Commission recommendation was to go with option number 2, which is the full rewrite. This could or would include districts use tables, revised techniques and requirements, and consultant assistance would be brought in to assist with this project, doing the writing, researching, preparation of the work. Department staff would act as project managers for this, so we'd have a form of control over how it was actually written so that it wasn't just flying in here from wherever for all to see. The budget, right now, we are tasked with $150,000 for fiscal year 21, and the time frame we expect it would probably take, or I anticipate it would take, probably around 18 months or more. Because if you're going to rewrite it, you got to look at the whole thing, do a diagnostic, and then start the process of revising it. Now, this is the 1,500-foot level. It suffers from several problems. One, the UDO is basically a combination of 2 separately enabled regulations, zoning and subdivision. They operate at 2 very different levels. Zoning is very prescriptive, it tends to require, if you want to make changes, you typically have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals to be able to waive the district requirements or to get relief from those standards. Subdivision regulations, on the other hand, are intended to be fairly flexible. You go to the Plan Commission, you get waivers or modifications to whatever is required in the ordinance. They agree to those things, and then you pass the ordinance and you move on. So they operate at very different levels, and yet we've got this thing where they're so overcombined that, for example, subdivision regulations, which are supposed to be flexible, are in parts 2, 5, 7, 8, and 10, as well as the definition section, which is absurdly complicated for staff to try and implement at any level. There are a lot of outdated approaches. It's got some overly complicated processes and old school techniques, and I'll get into that a little bit, along with too little integration of development review. So a lot of the things that might come into the Plan Commission for, say, a site plan review, Plan Commission will sign off on it, and then there's this tailing thing there where they still have to go through engineering review for review of things like stormwater and utilities construction and all that sort of thing. So there's like a leader and then there's a follower, and there's sort of like this delay period in between. It's not well designed in that way. There's a lack of clarity. There's a lot of words in there. Not many graphics either. A lot of the things that are done verbally or with words could be conveyed with images and much more effectively, so that it's much cleaner, easier for a person, Joe Public, to understand without having to talk to one of us to give them first level questions, first level answers. And then finally, lack of triggers. A lot of approvals in our office come through, and then it's like, okay, now what? Because we don't have an effective means to track what happens until inspection services comes back and said, okay, well, they're ready for an occupancy, and okay, well, now we got to go figure out where that is. There isn't a means by which they come back to us to get things done if they don't have everything done on the site. It would be a lot easier and better if it was more streamlined so that we had some kind of point of control. Okay, I'm going to now defend the people to the west. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but I'm going to throw them under the bus. This is the zoning map for the city of Muskego. This is an example of what you don't want to see. This map shows 97 zoning districts. There are 37 base districts, 8 overlays, and 52 planned development districts in the city of Muskego. Their actual land area is a little less than yours, mostly because of those 2 lakes in there, but they also have roughly 1/3 less population than you do, and yet they've got all these districts. That is absurdly complicated. I'd rather we got less complicated than more complicated. But not to say that you don't have a lot of complication either. You have 28 base districts, 12 residential districts, most of which seem awfully similar, 12 business or industrial districts, some of which are hardly ever used. You have 3 districts to implement the South 27th Street Corridor Plan, 3, and 36 planned development districts for a total of 73. I opine there that you could probably do that with half as many base districts and be just as effective. This is an example too much classification. The table on the right is the B5 highway district. The table of uses in here is 37 pages. That reduces it down to a usable number for the B5 district. We put that together on a separate detachment, so when somebody says, well, what can you do in the B5? We just hand them that. Well, that's what you can do in the B5 district. There's 26 permitted uses, including things like nature areas and wildlife sanctuaries. Like, I don't know if you're going to find a wildlife sanctuary in the B5 highway district, but who knows. 87 special uses. The UDO has 522 special uses. There are a lot of communities that don't have 522 uses listed. That's a lot of uses. That's a lot of approvals that have to come through this body in order to get approved to do anything. And I list a lot of them down there below, and it's not just B5. We have a lot of recent special use hearings, like a hair salon in the M1 district, or a car rental in the M1 district, where all they did, they had an existing car rental facility, but they were making minor changes to the parking lot. Sorry, you got to go to the council to get a special use approval. Use merchandise retail in the B3 district. New merchandise retail is permitted in B3, but if you're doing used merchandise, sorry, you got to get a special use approval. Drive-through use in the city civic center. That was the Big Coffee, if you remember, just came in here. The drive-through was built 12 years ago, but there was nothing approved to be attached to it, so they had to come and get an approval for a drive-through that's actually already there. You got a private school in the M1. That was the Askren Wrestling Academy, if you remember. We have e-commerce in the Franklin Corporate Park. Franklin Corporate Park is supposed to be a place you're trying to bring uses in. You make them come through here to get approval for e-commerce, which I would think you'd be trying to encourage. Finally, you have a drive-through restaurant use in Franklin Plaza. That's another example. It was a Burger King. RVs came in to buy the property and convert it to their use, but they had to make some minor modifications to the site, and they had to come through here to get approval for that. It's just way too much approval process and probably very little results, because a lot of these uses, as my staff calls them, a lot of that listing there is basically what my staff calls a souped-up zoning compliance permit, because all they're doing is we're waiting on approval so we can sign off on their permit. Involves virtually nothing on the site. We're just going through the motions because this is the hoop we have to jump through. I love this one. This section is the exclusions to natural resource protection and site intensity and capacity calculations are not required. That's a mouthful in any case, but if your eyes haven't glazed over yet, I applaud you. That is a lot of words. That's 1¼ pages if you see it on the page. It's over a page long just for a single paragraph. That's my example. That's the best case, or maybe worst case example of lack of clarity, when there's so many words that if you actually break it down, as you can see here, the areas of yellow are the words that are virtually the same. So you have the same verbiage repeated 3 times. The part in green is particularly interesting because that's the part where you create an exception for people trying to build an accessory structure or an addition. And because the verbiage there, it says, well, you can do that, but then, or maybe, or because, or sort of, or caveat, and then plan commission approval. That would include things like residential additions if they're within 100 feet of a resource feature. The Plan Commission doesn't review single-family dwellings, and yet what that seems to be inferring is that you'd have to come through if you were anywhere close to a resource feature for an addition or an accessory structure. It's just overkill. And most of these exceptions are wildly specific. I mean super specific. Like, you've got a whole series of qualifiers that would make it so rare that you'd almost never ever see it accepted. So somebody'd be better off just saying, oh, heck with it, I'm just going to provide you the NRPP just so I don't have to try and read that. In terms of graphics, I thought I'd provide you some examples of ways to communicate these graphics. This one pulled from the recently readopted Bloomington UDO. This is intended to provide some level of scale with a house on a property that's 2.5 acres large. And then each of those diagrams, each of the letters corresponds with a dimensional standard. So you have a way to communicate visually as well as the number on the bottom. Just for example, this is a larger or a smaller density or higher density district, I should say, smaller lots, same kind of thing in the same ordinance. Buffalo's UDO provides right off the bat each district. You have the district header, and then you have an image of what they're trying to convey, of the general character of the district that they're trying to convey. Provides a visual of the best case scenario for that type of thing. And then they provide the similar kind of district. In this case, they have the same standard, same numbers, and then they just identify the specific numbers under each of those districts and list them with their numbers. Fairfax, in their modernized zoning ordinance, provides an actual visual, an actual image of an area in that zoning district. So you can see what it looks like on the ground, and then they also do the graphic at the bottom. And then a corresponding chart with all of the various standards and requirements and caveats. Now, this is where I take a slight break and ask if you want me to keep going, because I will keep going if you want. Okay.
With regard to the natural resource protection standards, the reason there is detail upon detail upon detail is because there is a relatively substantial history which started around the turn of the century and proceeded with council appointed, plan commission appointed subcommittees, etc., to provide much more substantial natural resource protection regulations within the Unified Development Ordinance. That went on about a year and a half, 2 years, and through the years, it's often been mentioned that the city of Franklin UDO not only was more restrictive than Department of Natural Resource, Administrative Code, etc., standards and statutes, but that was intended to be and perhaps was the most regulatory provisions with regard to protecting natural resources in the state of Wisconsin. So that's
Okay.
anytime something would occur with a new development, any kind of exception for that historical reason was drafted very specific to that request per direction of Plan Commission and then ultimately approved by the council.
Okay. I kind of figured that's where it is, but at some point we're going to have to sort of rethink it and find a cleaner way to do this because they're a little bit over exact. Okay, we'll move on from Hurley. There's some. I'll outline some of these specific issues that we want to address. Staff 6 years ago came up with a top 20 list, which was more like their top 30 list. But then they tried to reduce it down to 20, so it was something a little bit more manageable. We'd have this discussion with an onboard consultant so we could figure out what to do with it. I'm sure they would identify the same kinds of problems. One example is the table of permitted uses. It adopts the standard industrial classification code listing, which is over 1,000 uses. It's outdated. We don't have any of the uses listed in the Standard Industrial Classification Manual 1987. This thing hasn't been updated since Reagan was president, and for good reason. They replaced it with the National or the North American Industry Classification System, which was, I think, adopted after NAFTA. But anything that's listed in the table, we have to reference this book rather than anything in the UDO. We don't have anything defined in the UDO that's listed in the table of permitted uses, so we have to use this book. So think of the UDO as that plus that, because otherwise we're lost. We don't have a specific handle on some of these categories. It's also way over specific. I mean, some of the uses in there are frankly mind-boggling. And some of them, the way we've organized them in our table of permitted uses, permit some types of, for example, contractors, but not other types of contractors in the same district, which is really kind of ridiculous and awfully hard to justify when we're talking to people over the phone. My predecessor recommended replacing the SIC code table with the NAICS table, which is called the NAICS table. I'm not in favor of that because the NAICS table is actually larger. There's 1,200 uses, and it's even more specific. And it's not, to my point of view, from my professional opinion, it's not necessary. Just as an example, I used to work for Fairfax County, Virginia for 5 years. Their update modernization project is actually good because they're finally bringing their ordinance into the 21st century too. Their 1978 ordinance. I checked their revised ordinance just to see what their table looks like, because they actually previously didn't have a table. They just had a list of uses in every district. So every time they did a use amendment, they had to adopt changes every single time they wanted to include it in a specific table or a specific district rather than just simply putting it in a table. I checked theirs just to see how big theirs was. Fairfax County is the largest municipality in Virginia, 1.15 million people, I think. Their table of uses is 8 pages, 144 uses, 144. remember, I told you, you have 520 special uses. They have 144 uses total. That's residential and non-residential. We can simplify this, and we should. You need to do some updates to comply with state federal law changes. They're specific to things like FEMA DNR updates to any kind of floodplain regulations. We have some updates to consider with regard to wetlands and how the DNR deals with some wetlands. Because some of them, they end up getting exempted, and so there's no reason for us to also regulate them. And things of that sort, as well as things like Act 67, and then the impervious coverage, which Glenn is probably somewhat familiar with. Sarah Arnold in his department is regularly being tasked by MMSD to provide updates on any changes in impervious coverage, and because nobody in the city actually regulates based on impervious coverage, we sort of have to do it by the back door because we don't regulate it, we regulate building coverage. So we probably need to consider doing something like that. Natural resource protection standards, as I mentioned, make some adjustments there, updates for wetlands, way DNR does some exemptions, as well as to consider a way to provide our own wetland banking as an alternative to mitigation on site. Finally, want to deal with, again, zoning processes, both the approval process and the follow-ups. And then the ones that are highlighted at the bottom are ones I'm going to actually address coming up here: open space development, parking, and districts. I wanted to provide this as an example of open space design, mostly because it's fairly new, fairly recent, still being built. This one provides 30% open space, and the reason why it's able to get the 30% open space is that if you look at that strip at the bottom, and I'll show you this, this is just the overall plat drawing. This is the aerial drawing. You see the area marked in, the area marked in red, that's your actual usable open space. The areas circled in blue are the two stormwater ponds. Everything that's green is a wetland that's sort of been relegated to outlots and sort of left alone. And everything in purple are these strips of open space. They're 50 feet wide. What are they supposed to do with 50-foot wide open space? They don't provide buffering because everything around them is zoned the same district. It's all the same density. You don't get a density bonus for doing, you don't get really any kind of density bonus for doing this. So they don't have any purpose. They're just there. And what's probably going to end up happening is the HOA somewhere down the line is going to say, we don't feel like maintaining that. So everybody who owns property abutting those things, you just make it part of your backyard, which is more or less what it should have been in the first place. Useless open space. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't function as anything. It's basically going to be the extension of your backyards. You have too many options like this, and most of them don't result in very good, very effective design. Parking. I took this example from an analysis of Kansas City, Missouri, because I think it's probably fairly apt for here. You see the person, the small woman in the middle there, because that provides you a sense of scale. Every single person per capita, this is per capita numbers, they have 1,065 square feet for building, 1,128 square feet for roadways, and a total of 1,219 square feet devoted to parking for every man, woman, and child. 1,219 square feet is 9 parking spaces for every man, woman, and child in Kansas City, Missouri. And it's probably not that different here. I'll give you an example here. This is the former Gander Mountain, and now is the Habitat Restore. The Habitat Restore got approved, only required 47 spaces. There were already 238 parking spaces on the site when it was developed with Gander Mountain. As a result of the redevelopment, there are currently 183 parking spaces more than they need. I've outlined them in red. It's 58,000 square feet of space that's just sitting there open. It does nothing except generate stormwater.
Okay.
Okay.
Just since you have this up, that's actually the site where Ms. Tessmer wants to have the dog park next to, and they have agreed to allow some of that parking for the dog park.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd point that out, since
Okay.
there could be a use for that large parking spot and save the city a lot of money in building a parking lot.
Okay. Well, but it still represents at the moment, regardless of whether or not it actually turns into a dog park, Right. But right now, what they've got is at the current rate of approximately how much it costs to build parking, at the rate of somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000 per parking space, that represents roughly $3.1 million worth of investment that sits there and does nothing but generate stormwater
Yep.
for nothing. You could easily turn a bunch of that into something, anything. Put a building on it, do anything.
And dovetailing off of that, I know anytime I go back there, that's an ad hoc truck stop, which I'm guessing is not a permitted use or a special use for that particular zoning.
It's not supposed to be there.
No.
That's overnight parking.
Yeah.
Technically, it's not supposed to be there. And it has
Which
been.
begs a whole lot of other issues that
Yeah.
don't pertain to this, but
Yeah, it's become like
it
a,
drives the point a little bit.
yeah, it's become a de facto truck stop for truckers who want to take a break, and so they park in the parking lot, take a nap or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it represents a massive malinvestment, and we can do better things with the land area in the city of Franklin than devoting it to things like that. Much more efficient ways to do things. Now back to the zoning map. I had GIS run through, and they've identified a whole bunch of zoning designations on there. There's about 32. They didn't include the OL1 or OL2 because it would be too many layers, and so they didn't include those. But they included a whole bunch of these district hits you can see there. One of them is the C1, which doesn't exist in the ordinance. It's on the map only. There's actually also 5 parcels in there that are currently zone M3 quarry. The M3 quarry district hasn't existed for 20 years, at least 20 years. But it's still on the map because we had a legal description error or variance between that and the actual parcels. And so there's this cute little strip along Ross and adjacent to the Payne and Dolan quarry that's zone quarry, but not PDD. That gives you some idea as to where we are. And as it's noted by Rick Power, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. It sort of sounds like a variation on Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. Your residential districts, that's all of them, all 12 of them. 9 of them are technically listed as single family, although the one R1E is kind of the funny outlier. But the variation between one to the next gets pretty small. The variation from R3E to R3 is 5,000 square feet, and R4 is 4,000. R5 is 3,000 square feet, and R6 is 2,000 square feet. So somebody's kind of cute when they did those numbers. They did a one number reduction all the way down. But the variation in intensity is so small, and the variation in differences in lot sizes is so small that it begs the question, why bother? Because you'd be hard pressed to tell me the difference between a subdivision with an R5 zoning and one with R6. They don't look that much different. There's almost no change. So there's really no reason to have all these districts. The one that's most creative is RC1, and RC1 doesn't exist on the map because that's the Franklin Corporate Park now. That's the most creative one because it comes with a variety of different potential residential uses. It begs a lot of questions like, why are there two? And the other thing is the 2 types of densities. The 2 columns on the left next to the district number, GD is gross density, ND is net density. Gross and net density shouldn't be the same number, because if they are, what are you doing? What's the point? Net density, that number should functionally be higher because it's reflecting a smaller area in the same property. That's the idea. You're supposed to give somebody credit for the fact that if they've got a highly constrained property, they can still get to a higher density just by dint of the fact that they've got less to work with. But if you don't do that, then there's no reason to have both of them. There's just no reason for it. And then in addition, if we start to deal with things like impervious coverage, some of your setbacks are too big, particularly front yards. like the R1 district with the 100-foot front yard setback, you're requiring somebody to have a minimum of somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 square feet of pavement just to get to their house. So you're taking away from their ability to build on their property because you're making them build a longer driveway to start with before they even get to their house. So that's kind of a problem too. I talked about an overabundance of districts. This is an example. This is the, again, back to the B5 highway district. This is the sum total of the B5 highway district, all 4 parcels. This is the sum total of the B6 professional office district, all 7 parcels. 6 of them are located right near here. The 3 lots at the lower left are right up here over by the corner, and the B6 over there on the right. Those are the 3 parcels that are between City Hall and the Police Department. There's really no reason to have them, especially if you're only going to have that many. There's not really any point to them. You could easily consolidate some of these districts into a combination of uses or a combination of districts and reduce the number overall, or reconceptualize what you're trying to do. You have 36 planned development districts. That's where they're located, all of them. You have 39 that were approved. 36 continue to exist. 3 of them, one of them was, the first one you ever did was rezoned out after it was zoned about a year later. And then the other 2 expired, although PDD 4 technically exists. If you see the property across from the seminary, right near where the Rawson Avenue is, right at that corner there, right across from where the seminary is, that's the only property that's actually had 2 PDD approvals on it, PDD 4 and 35. Each PDD basically becomes a separate zoning district. That's why I treat them as separate. And in a couple of cases, they're separate zoning ordinance. Witness PDD 7 and 18, where particularly in PDD 18, they have lists of permitted uses and they have excluded uses, but you can be permitted use if you're excluded if you get permission from the CDA. Or in the PDD 7, the other half, you have to go through the EDC to get approval for certain types of things or to get a recommendation for certain kinds of things. You have to go to the CDA in PDD 18 to get approval for signs. I mean, it's got its own thing. It's like its own mechanism, its own organism in and of itself. Aside from that, it's kind of confusing. I'm going to get into some other. I'm going to get some other.
PDD 18 is the Franklin Business Park?
Yeah.
Well, just another historical comment. Part of that was based upon the authorization to the Community Development Authority to, as its own decision-making authority, develop the Franklin Business Park. And that included financing and expenditures, et cetera, and after the fact, after a couple of decades, there were comments repeatedly over the years that it was the most successful business park in the state. Mayor's nodding his head, and the mayor was part of boards and commissions during a number of those. I just thought I'd.
Okay.
Could someone clarify, and I don't know if Heath knows this to the rest of the council, that some parts of the business park have the power of the council and other ones have power of the EDC, so.
Actually, that's kind of easy. The new business park is under the Community Development Authority. The old business park, the old industrial park is under, most of it is under the Economic Development Commission with some with Plan Commission approval. It varies. But the business park was CDA. CDA did Plan Commission stuff and Common Council stuff, as well as community development.
I remember at one time, because I remember sitting here, that they decided, nope, council's going to have control over that particular one. So I didn't remember which one it was, but I'd go back and look it up, I guess.
3 and 4 was that discussion.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to get into a couple of high-level discussions about some alternatives here. I mentioned low-impact development standards, conservation design, wind and solar, and affordable housing. Affordable housing, not as in complexes or things like that, but relatively small-scale options that can be considered. Low-impact development basically tries to marry the concept of stormwater management with landscaping, with parking design and other types of site design, so that you're integrating them rather than treating them as you got the building pod over here and the parking pod and the landscaping pod and the stormwater thing over here. You put them all together and you say, you know, why don't we try and have an integrated whole and try to lower the impact overall on the site, so that you try and, the most common approach is to wed things like stormwater management, bioswales, with effective landscaping that's united with the design of the swales and those types of features, to try and reduce the inclusion of stormwater craters all over the place, and to try and provide a little bit more integrated adoption, design option for site development. Related to that, or at least somewhat related to that, is conservation design. Conservation design is the idea, it's sort of like open space development, except what you're trying to do is provide a more effective means to protect things by being a little bit more flexible on the back end in terms of the design. Now, typically the way this has worked is that you look at the property, you do a natural resource protection plan. So you identify all those resources, then you design your thing around it. You design your development around it so that you absolutely minimize where you go. So as opposed to conservation, conventional design as shown on the left, where you basically have lots everywhere all over the property. You try to reduce the lot sizes, reduce the areas, and you create more open spaces that tend to be more unified, united, and integrated open space design, habitat corridors, and so on. The ultimate idea is that potentially, if well designed, you can solve multiple problems. You can reduce impact on sensitive natural resources. You can improve open space connectivity and habitat systems. You can reduce the costs of services and long-term maintenance by reducing road mileage, by reducing pipe lengths, by increasing per unit efficiency for water and sewer and stormwater. And if you also provide an aesthetic improvement over the conventional design. The one on the right would be a useful idea for the lower density areas. The idea, of course, is that rather than developing over that entire 38-acre parcel with houses all over the place and wiping out a lot of the trees and everything else, you simply consolidate it into a smaller area. You've reduced the amount of roadway, you've reduced the length of the pipe, you've reduced all the stormwater requirements into a smaller area, and you leave a lot of the property basically alone, or you leave it to sit in a natural state. That's the idea. Wind and solar. I think it would be important to provide for provisions for wind farms, although I tend to doubt you're going to see them here. You may, but I tend to doubt it, but you could at least provide for individual small-scale windmills or small-scale operations. I think you're far more likely to see solar facilities in this area, and potentially larger-scale solar installations, their solar utilities. But even then, you could still provide for provisions for installation of them on buildings or in yards, or over parking areas. The area on the lower right is the parking lot for the City of Bloomington, Indiana City Hall. Those canopies over the parking area also include solar panels. Here's a better example from Michigan State. The idea being that if you put carports over the parking area, you can do multiple things. You can provide shade, you can reduce the heat island effect in the parking area, and while you're at it, you can generate electricity. Now, affordable housing. When I talk about affordable housing, I don't mean the large parking, large complexes, or the urban renewal complexes. I've seen those up close. I took one trip in college, took a walking trip, an inadvertent walking tour of the Cabrini Green neighborhood in Chicago about midnight on a Friday. We took one wrong turn, and boy, we were walking right through it. That's not the way you want to do it. Warehousing people with limited means is not an effective way to do things. But what I'm talking about here is talking about what's called the missing middle. Most local regulations cover things for single-family detached, single-family attached, or duplexes, and then everything else is routed into multifamily. Anything 3 or more units becomes multifamily. Even townhouses are often treated as multifamily and often are designed like garden apartments rather than townhouses with frontage right on the street. They almost never do that. They're always a townhouse behind a parking lot in the middle of an area, and sometimes they're rental, and oftentimes they're designed as condo units. We could make easily small adjustments that would allow for some of these uses, some minor increases in units. All you need is to increase by, say, 1 unit, and you just add a duplex. You allow somebody to have an accessory dwelling unit, or something built over a garage, an accessory dwelling, any kind of unit, or just to convert a single unit into a duplex or a triplex in a way that doesn't look like a whole bunch of this stuff along a row. I've got a couple of examples here of, in the upper left, an accessory dwelling over the garage in the back of behind a bungalow in Portland, Oregon. The property on the drawing design on the right, that's a triplex. Doesn't look like a triplex. Looks like a single family house. Well designed, easily designed, and would integrate with just about any neighborhood. The property, the house on the lower left is it's in Gallatin, Tennessee. Anybody care to guess how many units are in that thing? Oh, well, that's true. It's yeah. That unit, it's actually got 3. There are 3 units in that property. It's a corner lot, and they were able to integrate 3 units in that property. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do that without necessarily creating an uproar, and most people wouldn't even see it. So, I mean, I think that's probably the end of my presentation, so I guess I'll take questions and leave you with that funny-looking design.
1 second. So the one thing that I want coming out of this UDO, in addition to what Heath is talking about, is I want to get rid of Plan Commission, Common Council approval of the stuff that should be staff approval. And I'll give you an example. About 8 years ago, the apartments on Mission Hills wanted to replace the columns between their patios. Weren't adding anything, weren't doing anything, but they had to come in for a special use application, which was a public hearing, Plan Commission approval, Common Council approval, just to fix their patios, their porches. We did one tonight with the sports complex. That should have been staff approval. Because did any of us have any issues with that? Would we have any issues? I don't think so. We get those all the time. And those ought to be, those kind of things, those routine matters, ought to be staff approval, because, and that would make us more friendly to the development community and our constituents. And it'll shorten the time that our staff has to work. What's your butt?
I just want to thank you for all your comments, and I thought they were really spot on in so many areas. So there are a couple things I want to just point out that I agree with and I'd like to kind of reinforce, and then maybe a couple other things that I just want to talk about in general. So back in the initial, I think it was 1998 when the UDO was first adopted, there were some complications with wetland issues that stood out, and some changes were made when it was adopted, and from that point on, it was messed up. That was the very first start off of the document, because one section was changed and the other section wasn't changed, and then it got thrown in a drawer for a while, and when it finally got brought back out to use, that section didn't jive with the one section, and that opened up the whole wetland conversations. But I don't know, Heath, have you ever gone back and looked at the original before all those other changes happened to it? Because the reason I asked is at that time, it was boilerplate for a lot of municipalities. Probably still a lot of it getting outdated, but worth a look to go back at the original document, because there's so many changes that have been made from that.
Yeah, I did take a look at it. I think some of it is probably simpler than what we have.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it, however, suffers from some of the basic sorts of problems that I mentioned at the beginning. I do think it's overcombined. I will say you're not the only ones that have this problem. Bloomington, Indiana adopted their UDO originally in 2007, and 10 years later they went through and reassessed it and the current document that they adopted last April basically took a lot of the things that they had hyper combined and pulled them back apart. So calling it a UDO is sort of almost a misnomer because they've got zoning over here and then they've got subdivision on the back end. So it's just its own section on the back end. And more or less what they did was they combined the definition section and everything else was more or less separated. I think it doesn't function very well because, as I mentioned, you have to keep dancing between various sections and cross references and everything else to try and figure out what's going on. And for staff, that's hard. It's even harder when we have to do, staff spends an inordinate amount of time with first level questions. What can I do with my property? If we can clean that up so that somebody can look at a zoning map online and then get the basics of what they need from the ordinance, then they can start asking us second level questions, which is how can I do what I want to do versus what's allowed? So we get to a point where we become helpful as a processing agent rather than as a source of information. Because that's where we are right now. We become the interpret. We're the oracles of Delphi before we even get into the door of starting to fix things or change things or provide assistance.
Okay. So I totally agree with the points about the natural resource, landscaping, stormwater, and combining those. I think that's a great idea, but the overabundance of special use applications, I had in here to add PDDs, which is something you brought up. A long time ago, I thought we should just stop doing PDDs because it creates a whole new set of rules. Every PDD has a separate set of rules, and then you can't apply anything equally or try to figure it out because everybody's different. One of the cautions for the alderpersons are the removing the special uses. Yes, I agree there's an overabundance. However, with special uses come our ability for our residents to have public input. And since the alderpersons are mostly the buffers between, staff and the city, we still need to have some acceptable measures for our residents, or we're going to be seen like we're not listening to them. So I guess I would like to have a reasonable amount of special uses still left in the ordinance. As far as some of the design aspects, I've always thought our front yard setbacks are way too big. I mean, when you look at how people use their homes, most of them use their backyards. They don't want to be out in the front yard. And we have this big space where this house is set way back, and it just becomes just a big area to mow. And there's been a lot of times where people have asked to move it up because all the natural resources end up in the backyard. And we can't do that because we won't allow that change. So then we end up with people opening their patio doors out into the natural resource. So I would like to see some flexibility in front yard setbacks. I know that for floodplain management, there has been a need to adopt a revised floodplain map for a long time, and for some reason we just have not done that or won't do that or don't want to do that. But I would like to see us look at the new adopted floodplain maps so we're actually applying the correct flood areas when we're doing development. And the last time we went through this, I sat down with Mark Liberta and Joel, and we spent over 3 weeks in the alderman's room going through the UDO on how we could simplify some of the natural resource protection plans. Now, at that time, I had an idea that we should look at Plan 176, which is a document that Sewer PAC identifies all the primary, secondary, and isolated natural areas in our city. And I don't know, Heath, are you able to pull up a map that shows some of the rivers and creeks? You had one of them that was like a zoning map that had it on there.
Not sure if I could do that from here.
Okay, well, anyway, pretty much the entire primary environmental corridor in the city of Franklin is the Root River. The Root River runs right about down the middle of our city. Mm-hmm. On the east side of the Root River is southern mesic woodland habitat, more trees. On the west side of the river is more prairie habitat. When fires used to come through years ago, historically, they didn't jump the Root River, and then you had more woodland on that side. We have a woodland ordinance we're applying to prairie savanna habitat on the west side of our city. I've never thought that it's made sense. So if you want to protect something like the Carity Prairie, which is the rarest habitat we have, it's not, you can't do it by our ordinance unless it happens to have a wet prairie, then you can cover it. So the aspect of the primary, secondary, and environmental, the corridor concept, so the primary is the Root River. The secondaries are Legend Creek, East Branch of the Root River, basically every tributary, Ryan Creek, every tributary that runs into the Root River. So those are the things that prevent flooding in our city. If we took the Sewer Pacts 176 plan and recognized the importance of the PEC and SEC and the INAs, we could simplify our natural resource protection. Now, we probably will miss a few isolated natural areas because Sewer Pact couldn't go out on everybody's private property, like Carity Prairie was missed and Don Adams Prairie was missed because, that was private property at the time. So there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, that map up on a wall letting developers know that, hey, if you come into the city and you have one of these features, we're going to be more cautious about this because they are protecting our city from being flooded, and they're some of the best resources we have left in our city. That gives people a heads up clearly right away and might help some of this natural resource issues that we have. The other thing we have with the flexibility with this wetland banking, we do have kind of silly wetland laws where we'll take a, really degraded habitat and say we have to protect it. And then sometimes we'll do this wetland banking issue with some of the money goes up north in like a cranberry bog, and it does nothing to bring the water resources or help the water flooding in our area. So I would like to see wetland banking, but I would like to see it done locally. The ordinance does say, used to say you had to do it in the same sub-watershed, and then it got kind of changed to the same watershed. But I definitely would like to see local mitigation first and not just paying off into a bank. Then it comes down to pretty much the point we're here, and that was the option. Which option do we do? I'm okay with really any of the options, but Heath, this is a question I have for you. You've identified so many good points, and you have some great ideas. If we send this out of house, how can we assure you will have the time to do the oversight? Let's just start with that question. Will you just expect the consultant to put it together and without your input, or will you still have to put in your time and input as you go along?
My intention is not to have the consultant go away and come back in 6 months with a full ordinance and then expect us to just sort of adopt it. I expect that one of the reasons why I expect it's going to take longer is because I intend me and to a certain extent my staff with whatever resources we have to be able to provide feedback and real feedback so that whatever we get from them is more appropriate for what we need rather than them coming back with something out of a boilerplate themselves.
So you won't be hands off is kind of what you're saying.
I want to be fully involved in this so that whatever we're getting is what we need from a consultant. So we're not just simply throwing money at them and saying, here, come back with an ordinance. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a position where we're reviewing an entire document after the fact. I want to be doing it all through the process.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder if we would be better off if we did it in-house and we swapped, having the consultant do the other part and having staff do the ordinances, since staff will be the one who will have to work with them, then there won't be, this duplicative effort and this learning curve of a new ordinance. And maybe you're perfectly comfortable, I'm just throwing that out as an option on which one you would prefer. I just, the time spent away doing that, would it be better if you just took that on and we gave you the consultant to do the other aspect? What are your thoughts on that?
The only problem with having consultants do our work is that on a per hour basis, they can get pretty expensive in a hurry. The consultants that we were working with, for example, last year when the department was running short, were charging us anywhere from $90 to $110 an hour. You aren't going to get nearly as much done in the time frame that we would have to operate under if we were paying them to do our job for us so we could then do this project. That's why it would probably be more effective to have a consultant do the legwork, the heavy lifting on revising this, and have staff back them up as project manager. My intention is not to have them take the project and run with it. We would still be the face of it. We would just have them to provide us the staff assistance on the support of actually doing the heavy lifting on this, and then we do the communications and review and make sure that it's what we actually want.
So could you bring this forward to us in a few chapters at a time or something so we can all get familiar with it? Or is this going to be one big, here it is, this is what we're doing?
My intention is to do this piece by piece. My intention would be to do it piece by piece, not all at once, because that's like saying to a starving man, here, have a giant burger or something. It's like, that's
Okay.
an awful lot to hand somebody all at once.
And the last thing, because I know other people want to ask questions too, is your consideration for sewer pack to save the city money. Could you just address that aspect of that?
I did explore the idea of having Sewer Pack do this for us. The problem with Sewer Pack is, yeah, they come cheaper, but then you have to wait. The indication from Sewer Pack was that it wasn't going to be until next calendar year before they could actually get to it, because they have limited staff too, and they have resources that they are required. Some of them get ahead of us. Anything that involves a county plan, for example, takes priority over any municipal function or anything like that. So the delay factor would be such that I think, based on the priority of what we're trying to get done here, we couldn't wait for them to do it.
Thank you.
City Attorney, and then, oh, okay, Alderman Nelson, push your button. Don't worry about it. Okay, there you go.
Heath,
Yeah.
thank you. Very, very, very tough thing to do, what your undertaking is, and I appreciate it. And I do echo one of the sentiments that Alderman Wilhelm brought up, and that was, if I was looking at War and Peace, I want to look at a section and a section and a section, or if you give us the big book like that, we're all asleep in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Because, right, that's all you're going to hear.
Yeah.
Okay? So my request would be just kind of what we're doing. If this is divided up into sections, we come here with the first section. What do we all think? We give our feedback. Then we go next section. And if we do this 20 times, my opinion, I'm all over that. I'm pro that, just because it's going to be easier to comprehend, easier to go over, and then we, as a team, understand these things, because we all have our own challenges. Like you brought up that one with the outbuildings. That's I had 11 of those. Okay, so I've got a lot of vested interest in that, because that's really pertains to me, what I see. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Also, Heath, thank you so much. The presentation, the write-up in our packet, very informational, very, very appreciated. I can't speak for the other alders, but I think we have all been around long enough to know how badly this is needed. And I'm excited at the prospect of having this done. In terms of what option we choose, I would prefer to defer to your expertise. You're the one who has to manage your staff. You know what your team can and can't do and what's going to work best for you to get us to the ultimate project. I hope that the final product serves us well for many years to come, so we don't have to go through a major process once again. And I agree with the other two aldermen that bringing this in sort of a piecemeal fashion would be the more easily digestible way to go, because we haven't even discussed what you bring up in your report about the comprehensive master plan also needing some work. The thing I would like us to keep in mind is how we are communicating this process to the residents. Because as these things with any ordinance changes or revisions, those are going to have to come up for public hearing. Am I correct? This is all going to have to be for public hearing, and I want to be sure our residents understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and that we're communicating that process along the way. So it's much more easily digestible, because big changes are can be scary. And I foresee people wanting to know, well, what's this mean? What can I not do this anymore? Can I not do that? Or so I want to have a good good way that we're communicating. Yes. Yep. Thanks.
Just an interjection here. The way I would tell constituents what we're doing is we're making a more clear document that gives us more flexibility in allowing them to do what they want, as opposed to what we have here, which is more restrictive. Alderman Barber, I've had you on mute because your microphone keeps giving us noise like that.
Hello?
I'm going to leave you off mute, but you got to mute yourself, Mike. Alderman Mayor.
Thank you again, Heath. I won't reiterate what's already been said. I'll keep it brief here, but there's a couple of takeaways. Number one, I think we all up here would like input as we go. Number two, if you bring this to council meetings, it could take a lot of discussion up here. So maybe there's a different way to go about the discussions. I don't know exactly what that would be, but maybe smaller parts, maybe special committee of the whole or something, because otherwise it's going to take a lot of time. It's already taken a lot of time tonight. And number three, I look forward to regular reports from Hurley.
I just got that.
The dog.
Oh, okay.
Alderman Barber, anything?
Yes, I have been struggling with this with the Economic Development Commission for well over a year now, and we've been looking at this, and it seems like an insurmountable endeavor that we're looking at here. I'd just like to know about how long this might take, knowing the scope of what's involved here. Is this like an 18-month thing where we can look at a product in 18 months that is set to go? What are your thoughts on that?
My expectation is that it's probably going to take around 18 months. It could take longer. Depends on the degree to which we're able to reach consensus on some of the changes that we're actually proposing to make. Some of these proposed changes are actually going to be fairly, I think, easier to reach consensus on than other pieces, but I expect that some of it we could be going around the horn a little bit, trying to figure out how to get to a useful solution. So I'm anticipating at least 18 months, but that's probably a fair characterization.
Thank you.
Alderman Denry, push your button.
Thanks, Heath. This is the second time that I had an opportunity to listen to this presentation. Alderwoman Wilhelm, Yes, we did consider your request of looking at doing it internally versus externally. And the recommendation by staff and by Heath was to look at doing it this way and to facilitate and to assist. In regards to why the Plan Commission came up with option 2, that was the lesser of all evils. Option 3 to start over would be a nightmare in regards to the number of public hearings that you'd have to have in regards to the whole city. Option 2 allows us to circumvent some of those. Okay. And number 1 didn't seem like it was going to do the job that we needed to have done. The last concern here is the cost. The reason why we didn't do it 6 years ago was the cost. We've got a certain amount budgeted in 2021, and there'll have to be another probably bigger piece of the pie budgeted for the following year to be able to get the project done. We don't have any idea going forward on what this is going to inevitably cost us yet, unless Heath did get some round numbers, but I doubt it. Heath, did you get it? Did you?
Well, let me put it this way. My original request in the budget was with the idea of something akin to what Bloomington did. Bloomington's consultant charged them, I think they did the whole project for somewhere around 220, 230,000 overall. But then again, their project started out, they started out with the idea, oh, this will take you a year, and it took them more like 2.5 years. So it kept going and going and going, because they didn't have, to my mind, they didn't really have an understanding as to how long it would take them to unwind their thing. Bloomington also entertained a process that involved actually examining all of their districts and coming up with different ones. So they added levels of complication to it that probably weren't originally apparent to them when they started.
Okay.
I'm fully cognizant of the fact we're probably going to be reducing numbers of districts and potentially reorganizing some of the districts or coming up with different ones.
Sure.
So I'm fully aware of that. So I think that helps. But I expect it very likely could probably be more than the 150 we're starting with.
Well, I know the mayor can probably interject, and he may have an idea of what it cost back in 1998. And I think it cost well over, or over a couple $100,000. So back then. So
I remember 300, but I don't know if that's accurate.
yeah. So I mean, it just so long. If we decide to move forward, I know that this is going to be a rather major project to do. But I'm done.
Just on this latest point, my recollection is that the consult who worked with planning staff for 2 or 3 years, the mid-90s, with regard to redoing the zoning code and including the land division code, his work with regard to needs assessment for impact fees, the every 5-year update was $2,500. So I dare say that the cost of creating the EO, not the numbers I heard, and historically my recollection from the 90s was that planning staff, et cetera, and the consult had the thoughts that the UDO method of zoning and land division local regulations was the new wave of how it was going to go, as opposed to what I heard earlier about a number of municipalities already having that. So, what was the most recent one? It was the 20 number, right? Right, okay.
So if my wife was here, she would jump up and down because I said I was probably wrong, and I was. Briefly, Alderman Wilhelm, please.
So what is our next step as far as moving forward? Is there going to be a contract put together? Do we see the contract? Do we just give Heath the authority to go out? How do we, what's next?
Well, I was about to do that. But the city attorney wants to opine. Push a button.
Just in terms of process and what ultimately gets done, my recollection on C1 Conservancy, for example, as well as some of the F1 floodways is because, and in addition to changing zoning districts, especially citywide, that is what they are zoned right now. To change them would require a rezoning to either a new district or to remove the district. And the reason the C1 zoning still exists is because ultimately the Common Council back then decided it did not want to file applications for rezoning properties citywide. And if you did the entire city, hypothetically, what stadium would you hold the public hearing in with the thousands and thousands and thousands of public hearing notices that would have to be delivered, et cetera, et cetera. So that changing zoning districts requires that rezoning. So that's going to have to be looked at relatively closely. Well, that's how the C1 ended up. Whenever that land would be developed or redeveloped, and propose a rezoning that's or some other development permission required, it needed to be accompanied by a rezone of the C1. So that's kind of how the process was recommended back then and has proceeded.
So a direct answer, a little bit more simple, is this is not a rezoning. This is giving us the basis to rezone, but this is not a rezoning. The proposed action tonight is that you authorize, Mr. Eddy's already got an RFP produced, pretty much. So the request tonight is to authorize staff to proceed under option 2 and to allow the planning manager to release his RFP and then return to the council with a recommendation.
I'd like to so move.
I'll second.
Discussion. And again, this is not a rezoning. So we don't want the constituents to get upset. It's not a rezoning yet.
No, it's an ordinance issue.
I know you did. I'm just making it clear and short and sweet because things get convoluted once in a while. So, okay, any discussion of that motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Heath. Okay. You want to take a break or keep going? Okay. Item G6 is to establish a sewer user fee for 2021. Mr. City Engineer, you want to tell us, give us your recommendation, please.
So you can see here in the write-up that Finance graciously put together. MMSD is raising their rates, and we also expect that we're going to have to be spending some large amounts of cash on a lift station, so we need to raise rates. We anticipate a 6% rate increase in the 21 budget.
So what is the rate that you're asking us to establish? Is it 65 quarter, 65.76 a quarter?
65.76 and a fixed commercial connection charge of $14.46 plus $3.85 and some parts per 1,000-gallon volumetric change.
And the document shows that that's roughly it's $5.86 increase
Yes,
per quarter for the average residential customer.
Yes, sir.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Second.
Now we're talking about the increase of $5.86 as a matter of the reference,
Yes, the full amount.
586.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Discussion on that motion. Alderman Lowe.
I don't get a bill, it's included, so is that, people get their bills quarterly then?
Mhm.
So everybody will see about a $5 or $6 every time their bill comes?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
On average. Okay, on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G7 is a report on the TID districts. Any questions on the report?
Move to place on file.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Sorry, Paul, I should have asked you if you wanted to do some highlights. You didn't raise your hand, so. Okay, G8 on page 165 is a resolution to submit a non-participating letter to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for reconstruction of 27th Street in the amount of estimated $950,000.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
You got beat on that one, Mike. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
We have a discussion over here.
Uh-oh. Alderman Mayor.
So can we have kind of a brief overview of this? We're going to end up paying this, but we're saving because the state was doing the reconstruction, but now it's going to be just all on us. How does this work?
So this was discussed several months ago when we had the Elm Road project redesigned. Development of our corporate park involves a secondary, actually another lane coming from the interstate to 27th Street. TID law prevents us from spending monies outside of our corporate limits. So we worked out a negotiation with the state where we would help them, assist them with their project that we can help with, and we cannot, and they would in turn do the project that they did for us.
But we end up paying for it.
Yes, we need to pay for it because we needed an additional lane on Elm Road.
And does it come from the TIF district or no?
This project on 27th Street will come from the TIF
It
district.
can come from the TIF district.
Yeah, we can pay for projects along 27th Street.
Okay. Did Oak Creek have a similar situation on the other side? What did they do? They must have had a similar situation over there.
Elm Road really doesn't benefit their developments.
Elm Road only heads west.
Yeah, but there had to be something
Oak
to
Creek-
their side.
Oak Creek could have developed their properties and not required an additional lane. We anticipate lots of new traffic to our corporate site.
Okay. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Alderman Dandria.
Is driven out this way. It tees right there. You got an off ramp, and then you can head west. And nothing goes into the Oak Creek proper yet. It's all field. It's not to say that Oak Creek can't develop it somewhere down the road, but right now there is nothing there. So that's why it is what it is. And what
It is essentially a Franklin exit.
Yes, yes.
Item G10, page 173, is authorization to survey some properties on St. Martin's Road for potential sanitary sewer. Did I do? I'm just hoping, that's what it is. It's wishful thinking. G9, page 169 is a resolution to amend a contract with Grace to prepare modifications to the building for the industrial park lift station. I will just tell you, it's because of me wanting a building that didn't look like a box.
Approve.
Motion by Hanneman, is there a second?
Second.
We'll give it to Barbara, okay, John? Seconded by Barber. All those in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to G10, which is to survey for sanitary sewer along St. Martin's Road. That is,
I like that.
that's Dan's district, isn't it?
What-
Alderman Nelson.
I was going to ask if city engineer could just give a few points on
Sure.
this.
City engineer.
You may recall 10609 West St. Martin's came and asked for permission to connect to our sanitary sewer with a grinder pump. That permission was granted. Almost a day later, maybe 2 days later, the owner called me and said, hey, I talked to 6 or 7 of my neighbors to the west. Everybody else wants to connect to the sanitary sewer also. We did some investigation, whether it made sense to do a gravity sewer, and found out that was not possible. Doing some more research, we found the archives. The ultimate drainage basin is to flow by gravity over to 116th Street, down the west side of 116th Street, and down to Ryan Road, to the interceptor. I would submit to you it's going to be several decades before all those properties develop into subdivisions to extend the sanitary sewer. We are proposing something that is in Franklin currently, where individual houses have their own little grinder pump station and pump to a common force main. The example is up on Wolf Road, but currently that is a private system. We are proposing this would be a public system. These are very common systems where gravity sewer does not work, and I've designed several of them in my career. I have confidence in them. We would, as part of the project, we would actually install a grinder pump station for the homes, but then we would turn that over to each home for them to own and operate, and therefore the only thing we have to own and operate is the small diameter force main in the right of way.
Yeah, Alderman Mayor, I'd like to yield to him first before I make a comment.
Okay, just a couple questions. Glenn, what is the future for the private septic systems? Because, and what is a grinder? Because if somebody spends 52,000 or 60,000 or 56 or 7,000 on this, wouldn't they be able to keep their private system going for a long time for that kind of money?
It depends. So 10609 had a failing septic system. When the soils get so bad, they have to install a mound system. So reportedly, the restaurant on 76th Street, when they had to replace theirs, spent $40,000-$50,000 is what I understand. So it's not uncommon to spend that much money. It's either that or move out of your house. So it's the soils are not conducive to septic systems. You know, they're high water tables and so forth, and we're fortunate that they've lasted as long as they have.
So what about a mound system? How long could that last?
Depends on how well it's taken care of. The Hideaway, the restaurant that I just mentioned, they had to put another one in, as I understand. I'm not familiar with the design, but I think that they had to put in a second one. So if it's taken care of, they can, in theory, last forever, but people tend not to take care of them. Hideaway has some.
So we're just surveying on the west side of St. Martin's Road. What about on the east side?
So I call it the north side and south side, depending on how you look at it. But the north side, those homes, we're surveying a few homes on the north side. But for the most part, those homes are connected to a sewer along whatever street that is in the subdivision.
Okay, that's what
And
I
then the
thought.
church itself is actually connected. I forget the name of the road, but they're connected another way.
Right. Well, in the future, if this does go through for the people on the north side or west side, whichever side you want to call it, if in the future the people on the east side who are not connected, is this a potential for them?
So, yeah, you're talking, so,
Or would it make more sense to go back toward the
Well,
subdivision?
so we do have a few homes on the east side. So I've listed them on page.
I didn't see any addresses on the east side.
There are a couple addresses on the east side on page 176, and I don't know which ones they are.
Okay.
Just add them on the list, Alderman. If you want them surveyed, we'll survey them.
Yeah, we can add them. So if you look at the page on 177, you start at the Chapel Hill, up to where you see the orange line in the middle. all those homes are connected on Mission
Okay.
Drive.
That's what I thought.
There is one parcel right there. It's a triangular shaped parcel is the only parcel that could potentially connect.
Okay.
And maybe it's because it doesn't have an address.
And now refresh my memory here. When the survey comes back, if the majority want us to proceed like this, then the other ones are more or less, and it depends on what the council action is, but the others are more or less required to join in too, aren't they?
As I explain it to folks that I talk to, I say really the survey is to indicate to you how the feeling in the neighborhood is. In theory, everyone could be for the project and you could deny it. Everyone could be against the project and you could build it. So obviously, if it looks like most of the people want it, you would take that into consideration whether the city wants to do the project.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to move forward with motion to option A, Adam.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's give that, motion was made by Alderman Nelson, seconded by Alderman Mayor. Discussion of that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G11, Tourism Commission, consideration for a contract with Olympus.
Mayor, do you want two motions?
Once, we got a couple of things first, but what are we doing a motion here? Mr. City Attorney.
Only just a very minor note, motion to approve the resolution as well, which approves the contract. Additionally, there's some very minor dates are a little bit off on that, so the dates just need to be corrected.
I'd say let's just do one and wrap it up. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution and letter of commitment to Milwaukee County, subject to minor corrections via the city attorney.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G12, page 201, is authorizing or licensing the trademark to the Tourism Commission. Alderman Wilhelm.
Well, I have a couple of questions here. Is the intent to create the tourism, this new Engage Franklin, to act like a Southeast Chamber type, like the Chamber of Commerce used to be? 'Cause I'm not understanding. We already have our tourism organization, so what's the Engage Franklin portion going to add, or what's the need?
Ms. Burke, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so the Tourism Commission has outgrown their ability to utilize me as a staff person to administer to all of their needs, which includes a full spectrum of advertising, marketing, public relations, events, and so on and so forth. And Rock Ventures has made a proposal that they would allow the commission to leverage the tourism clout that they already have as a destination here in Franklin to create a visitor center in the lobby and to provide space for the new executive director for the Tourism Commission and Rock Ventures. And so together, the two organizations are creating Engage Franklin so that it is an equitable split of resources with the executive director in an effort to ensure that our smaller businesses that don't necessarily have the budget to expend money for large media buys, for example, they can participate in a co-op style or a co-op fashion. And so the director under the Engage Franklin label, which will be similar to like Visit Milwaukee or another type of visitors bureau or convention center, and it will provide opportunity for our other businesses to not just take advantage of those types of marketing and advertising opportunities, but also to take advantage of any types of events like a restaurant row or a kite flying event or anything along those lines. So the purpose in tonight's council action is to make sure that Carrie Grieving, who will be coming to the next council meeting, or maybe the one after that, I'm not sure, to introduce herself to you, is going to be moving forward with a lot of these activities. And we need to make sure that she has the ability to use the Franklin name and logo so that we don't end up with any misunderstandings or misconceptions farther down the road.
Well, good. That brings me to my next question is, who exactly will have control over the logo? Because it's not clear in this document. So is it the entire committee just gets to use the logo, but you're saying it would be under the direction of this particular person?
It would be under the direction of Engage Franklin. So once the naming rights agreement that we shared with you at the last council meeting is executed, the next step is to work with Eric Van Schindel with Quarles and Brady, who is on the meeting with us this evening, to craft the Engage Franklin agreement in such a way that we will ensure that, one, only Engage Franklin will be using, and not individuals of the Tourism Commission or Rock Ventures. It will be strictly through Engage Franklin. And two, that the Engage Franklin organization can create its own board of directors, and then they will do the policy making around the activities that may involve the use of the city logo.
Okay. I just, as an alder person who's elected by the people, I don't have as much power to use the city logo as a unelected committee. So I would like to see some type of language that would allow, you know, a little more control over how it's used. I really don't see a lot of that in this document. And then the other thing is it's all royalty free. So will the logo be used on items that will be sold, that where the city may want to have a percentage of products that are sold with using the city logo, or are we just giving our logo up to be used and the taxpayers lose out on any income we could get from our logo, or how is that going to work?
I'll have the attorney talk about that, but I direct everybody's attention relative to quality control and what the city has to say about it is paragraph 2 of it says quality control. In essence, the city keeps control over how it gets used. As a practical matter, I don't know how that's going to work, because if they print something up and it's out, it's out. But at the end of the day, they're looking out for our interests. So anyway,
Right. So
Eric, do you want to comment on the Alderman's questions, please?
Yeah, happy to answer any further questions on it too. But I think some of your questions are answered, Alderwoman, by that there are other agreements that have yet to be drafted and put into place. And some of them address some of the issues that you're talking about, and some of them won't, and that if you want to actually modify what this agreement is, then we should talk about that and potentially modify it. As it relates to the controls, the agreement is currently drafted and contemplated, though again, that's subject to potential change, is that the city permits the commission to use its discretion in terms of what it's going to do with this particular logo and name at this moment. And the current idea, as I understand it, is right now there's this naming agreement that we talked about the last time I was here in closed session, that the naming agreement is going to be with Rock Ventures. This agreement permits the commission to have the logo be used by Rock Ventures as a part of the naming that's on the stadium right now, and in any other activities that the commission is looking to do. As Ms. Berg was talking about, there's also going to be Engage Franklin after this point. When that's created, the commission will likely enter into a separate agreement with Engage Franklin that permits the Engage Franklin then to use the logo, subject to whatever restrictions you may want to see or the commission may want to see in terms of limitations on Engage Franklin. So we have a couple of steps that we can put limitations on if that's what the city council and or the commission would like to have happen.
And we do.
If that answers your question.
And the royalties, if we chose to demand them, would come with that agreement between the commission and Engage Franklin. Is that correct?
That is one of the steps you could do then. I mean, you could have a royalty agreement between the city and the commission. In some ways, that is Peter paying Paul in that circumstance, because obviously the funds, while not being exactly the same between the two different entities, will obviously be taking from one group to be able to pay another. But that's a decision for, frankly, you to make and the commission to make as well.
Well, maybe that's an offset for some of the attorney and staff time that's gone out. I don't know. It's just, so right now we're about to adopt a resolution that just gives them the free trade, and it says royalty free. And so a resolution in front of us doesn't really do any percentage or include any of that. So I kind of would like to see that addressed earlier than later. Otherwise, we'll have to modify this if we decide to do it that way. And the other item I have is it talks about this can be terminated, but the time frame is 120 days. I mean, that's like a half a year before you can have a termination. And then it says, or if there's a breach, but there's not one item in this whole thing that spells out what a breach is. So it's okay to have a thing if there's a breach of contract, but you have to have items to be breached in order to hold someone to a standard. And unless you can show me something I missed, there's nothing in the agreement that would allow us an out for a breach.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways you can do that. One, we could put in express things. Two, I do point to what the mayor talked about a moment ago, and that's the quality control. There's an express obligation that the Tourism Commission will use the trademarks in the form designated by Franklin and do it consistent with the standard and quality currently provided. And if they don't do that, that would be a breach, as an example to you. Now, is that a nebulous statement? Yes. Do you want to have more curbs around that to understand what that is? We could do that. We could go down a rabbit hole on that, and I'm not saying that that's not a reason we shouldn't do it, but this could go from what is a 2-page agreement, which I admit is short, to a 50-page agreement if you needed to be able to really delineate all the different circumstances that things can and can't be used. And that is honestly something we can do.
I'm not
that's just
looking
a
for a
decision
rabbit hole. I'm not looking for anything big, but I think we ought to have at least something in there to protect the city's interests. I mean, we do represent the taxpayers, and we've got to. That's our job, is to watch out for it. So.
I'm happy to do that. I think the delineation would be how far do you want to go, and what are you really looking for, frankly. There.
Give me one or two at least. You know.
Let me offer a solution to this problem. Addition of another sentence in the quality control, paragraph 2, that says to the effect that the Tourism Commission and its assigns recognize the value of the logo and trademarks and the reputation to the city, and they will ensure that that reputation and value is protected at all times. That work for you, Alderman?
Yeah. And what about the royalty and time frame?
Well, the royalties we can handle with a separate agreement. The time issue, why is it 120 days, Eric?
You know, frankly, that's, I think, a common type of agreement to be able to give enough of a runway to be able to get out. If the city wants to have a smaller amount of time, that's also something to be discussed.
We got a suggestion for 90. Any issues with that? Alderman Nelson?
Yeah, I'd like to go no more than 60. Just to throw that out there. I mean, once something gets lost in, I mean, we want to somehow, I'd like to do 30s, but somehow as this thing goes sideways, how can we, take care of it quickly?
Alderman Hannon.
I would ask to compromise more towards 90 days, only because when things like this come up, with timing of council meetings, it doesn't give a lot of time for something to come to us and, really examine the situation. So I'm suggesting 90 days.
I think the consensus is 90. Okay? All right, Eric, can we change that to 90?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this and then move on. And Mr. City Attorney, then Alderman Wilhelm. You gotta push your button, Josie.
Just a couple of points. Eric, yesterday we had a discussion about not just the logo agreement, but also the naming agreement, which was before the council at its last meeting and does provide for the allowance of the use of the logo as well as the name being Franklin, the name of the city. And with regard to this logo agreement, outside of it being as discussed, two-page agreement here and points from council members this evening, my two thoughts on review were boiled down to, okay, and I heard Kelly say name and logo earlier, and my thought was the name should be included in this agreement as the common council authorizing the use of Franklin, because that's part of the naming agreement, and also an indemnity provision, and which fits into the realm of some of the discussion here by council members, and your thoughts on adding those to this agreement.
That questions to me, I have absolutely no problem with either of those. Again, I can say, hey, first off, I agree with you that the name absolutely should be included, and that was an oversight on my part. The indemnification I consider to be a decision between both the city and the commission in terms of whether that's necessary. I take no position. That's something we can easily put in.
And then just a couple other points, since the naming agreement, which you sent over yesterday afternoon, I understand that's going to the Tourism Commission at a meeting on this Thursday. I did review changes you sent from the copy of the agreement that was before the Common Council in the meeting agenda packet a couple weeks ago. And my understanding was there was a provision added on page 7 essentially saying the parties to that agreement agreed to get together in 2023 to discuss whether or not different terms or renegotiation would be appropriate. And then on the 10th page of that agreement, it's not numbered 10, but it's the 10th page in order. The few sentences that were added changed what was in the prior agreement from if revenue of the Tourism Commission is reduced below $300,000 for a revenue or for a year, then the commission or the entity, if the entity receives the contract rights after creation, would be able to reduce the $150,000 per year per contract term for that year, but would still be responsible for it without interest. And the change that was made was that 300,000 was reduced to 225,000, and the reduction amount, which would still be owed through final payment thereof at some point in time without interest, would be calculated based upon the low revenue lower than 225,000 on a percentage basis. And that was pretty much it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the council members are aware.
And I was going to inject myself this afternoon during the front and back, but if you think about the reduction to 225, that leaves the Tourism Commission with 75 grand to operate and pay their portion of the salary for the executive director. My recommendation to the Tourism Commission is leave it at 300. If that's a deal breaker, so be it. Because you need money to operate. And this idea that in 2 years you're going to renegotiate, 10-year deal's a 10-year deal. If you want it shorter, make it shorter, but don't put a clause in the middle of it that says, but if we feel like it, we're going to do something different. Alderman Wilhelm.
So it's a question for the city attorney, that the resolution on 202 and the agreement on page 203 both include the royalty-free licensing, and should the city want to say percentage of sales, 1-3%, I don't know, and to recoup staff costs or something, that probably needs to be addressed in another document or struck from this document? Is that?
You want me to look at revenues? I wouldn't want to do that without the Director of Finance and Treasurer and the Director of Administration, who's nodding her head right now.
Well, could we
Meaning
put,
yes.
could we put in, I don't know, I'm ringing here. Could we put in some type of clause in here or something? So right now we're adding the naming, we're doing the identity, the 90 days. And then, so the only other thing that's left is that if they're going to start selling the logo and making money off of it, are we just left out of that or not? And how do we address that if we're going to try to adopt these both tonight? So that's my question.
Well, the city attorney's better qualified to answer this, but in the sake of trying to move this along, as I understand this agreement, this is merely to allow them to use the trademark. If we want royalties, I believe that should be a second agreement that specifies where we want to get the royalties from, because this agreement is a blanket agreement that allows it to put them on the letterhead.
But it includes all the royalty language that we don't get any right now.
But a subsequent agreement can modify this one and clearly spell out where we want the money to come from.
Or just strike those sections now.
Because then we'd have to specify royalties, and they don't get to put the logo on their business cards.
Well, they wouldn't be selling the business cards. I'm talking about if they print up face masks with
But
our
if
logo.
you put a royalty in this, then they got to pay for every business card, every letterhead, anytime they use it. So that's why this one does not have, and I'm over my skis here. I'm not an attorney, but that's the way I read it.
I'm just saying for sales. I'm not saying for printing. I'm saying
Let's just handle that in a second.
items that are for sale.
This is attorney.
If you authorize an agreement that doesn't provide for that, how do you turn around after that fact and demand some form of payment in return for what you're granting in this agreement?
So I'd like to say except for sales. Exception. Just add an exception line with the exception of sales, which may come under a separate agreement.
All right, let me propose under paragraph 1, after the word royalty free, insert the words for non-revenue generating uses.
That would also,
Alderman Wilhelm's mic's off, but she said that also goes in the second whereas in the resolution. Yeah, number 1 on the license grant. And is that okay?
3 places.
Well, I'd prefer to hear from the department heads I mentioned earlier. So the Tourism Commission would pay money as a result of some non-sales generating.
Sales. Let's say they print up a whole bunch of. Everybody is selling logo. Do we want to just, hey, somebody else is making money off of our name? Or do we want to at least have some, percentage of that? I mean, it could be substantial, it could be nothing, it could, but, just
Which
a
is
thought.
why-
I mean, we are the city, and we're the taxpayers really that are ultimately losing out if we don't do anything.
Which is why I suggest the language that just excludes revenue generating sales.
Okay.
Paul? We don't have to charge it, but this allows us to charge.
If the Tourism Commission is permitting the use of the city's name on a baseball field, which is generating ticket revenue, is that a revenue generating use of the name, or is that not a revenue
I
generating
got it
use?
fixed. I got it fixed. Keep going.
So without seeing all of the agreement that's there, it's hard to comment on it right now. And I would suggest you table it and send it back when it's in a new form that you're happier with.
All right. If you choose to table it, that's fine. Just let me give you the proposed language for section 1, paragraph 1, after royalty free for non-direct revenue uses. So it's your choice. You want to? All right. Let's try it this way.
What does Kelly have to say?
Callie, do you have an opinion? Even though you're
I do,
working for us?
actually. The idea of Engage Franklin is for basically to be a not-for-profit. So the idea would be that we would be plowing any money that's made back in to create additional streams of tourism and promotion and branding and awareness and those sorts of activities, especially in the first few years when Engage Franklin is trying to build banks so they actually have some capital to do some, as of right now, unforeseeable promotional opportunities that might be really salty. So while the city can certainly pursue that, and Engage Franklin isn't informed yet, but I really don't see that a tremendous amount of their activity will be revolving around selling swag. I really see it more as events and print advertising, radio advertising, billboards, those types of things where there wouldn't be any revenue opportunity.
I'm gonna interrupt you and respectfully disagree, because the first thing out of the chute is gonna be Franklin Field baseball caps and Franklin Field T-shirts. And it's right in the agreement. That's the first thing that happens with Mike and Engage Franklin is co-marketing agreements for merchandise sales in their stadium. So, but I'm trying to move this along. So the fact that we that we may want to charge a fee for using the logo is may, not will. So let's put it in, and if we never use it, we never use it. It's that easy. So let me do this. Is there a motion to approve the resolution for Tourism Commission to use the city trademark and logo with the following additions? Under paragraph 1, license grant, insert the words for non-direct revenue uses or other such language as determined by the attorneys. Add a paragraph under paragraph 2, the language that I proposed earlier in the meeting relative to the value of the name and their oversight of its use. Add the language that permits use of the Franklin name, add an indemnity clause, and change the term to 90 days. There's such a motion. Oh,
This the second whereas says royalty on the second whereas.
okay, we'll have them with the technical corrections by the staff.
Okay.
Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I don't mean to be impatient, but we got a lot of business yet to do, and if we sit there and kill this, it'll be. Okay, item G13 on 207, an ordinance to amend ordinance 2020-2453, an ordinance adopting 2021 annual budgets for capital improvement sanitary sewer funds to remove encumbrance appropriations for late arriving 2020 expenditures charged to 2020 operations. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? I'm sorry, roll call, Madam Clerk. Thank you, sorry, Paul.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm. Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. G14 on page 209, authorization for request for proposal on audit and other accounting review services for fiscal 21 and through 25.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Wilhelm, seconded by Hanneman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G15, on page 211, an ordinance to amend ordinance 2019-2398, an ordinance adopting 2020 annual budgets for general fund capital outlay grant, debt service, TID 5, TID 6, TID 7, to align COVID-19 contingency appropriations with the actual 2020 expenditures and other 2020 budget adjustments.
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Hanneman, seconded by Dandria, and we need a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm. Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber. Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. G16, authorize evaluation to determine feasibility of establishing a fiber network to access internet services for the City of Franklin business operations, including the possibility of additional infrastructure to serve the community at a cost not to exceed $12,567.
Question.
Alderman Wilhelm.
So when we say Franklin business operations, we're talking not just in City Hall, we're talking about like Northwestern Mutual. I mean, even though I know they have their own fiber optics, we're
City business operations would be any city of Franklin.
anything in the
employer.
city. So we're not,
Police, fire, DPW.
so we're not talking about running it down a certain road or anything, or?
We are, but that was the addition piece, including the possibility of additional infrastructure to serve the community. That's referring to that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mike, you're making all kinds of noise. Is there a motion to authorize evaluation? Well, is there a motion to approve as council action?
So move.
Is there a second? Moved by Barber, seconded by Nelson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G17 is the dog park proposal. Wait a minute, that's closed session.
I just like to make a motion to enter
Because that didn't make it on the tape, Alderman Wilhelm did the second paragraph, which is authorizing the agreement with Sigma Group for $6,000. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Nelson. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's go to licenses. There are no licenses today, which was kind of fun.
First ever.
You guys all had time to go home and have some dinner, didn't you? Anyway, okay, so we move to I-1, which is a vouchers. Is there a motion approving the following? City vouchers with an ending date of March 1st, 2021, in the amount of $4,294,582.50. And payroll dated February 26, 2021, in the amount of $405,140.38, and payments of various payroll deductions in the amount of $464,862.23 plus city matching payments. An estimated payroll for March 12th, estimated $398,000, and the various payroll deductions estimated $269,000 plus city matching payments. and property tax disbursements with an ending date of February 26, 2021, in the amount of $6,903,904.25.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Dandria and Hanneman. Madam Clerk.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absence, no abstention. Just double check something here.
I move
Okay.
a 4-minute recess.
Let's be back at 10 minutes to 9. Do we stop? It is 9:52. We have resumed from our little recess. We're going to move on with a couple of closed sessions. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, this will go dark, and unless we have action on these items, we will not go back to the stream. Item G19. Is there a motion to go into closed session, the common council enter closed session pursuant to 19.85 sub 1 sub C and E of the Wisconsin State Statutes to discuss collective bargaining strategy in negotiations with the Franklin Professional Firefighters Association, Local 2760 of the International Association of Firefighters, and bargaining strategy related to service levels and staffing for competitive and bargaining reasons, and to re-enter open session at the same place thereafter to act on such matters discussed therein as the common council deems appropriate. Moved by Wilhelm, seconded by Hanneman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we got a roll call, sorry. Madam Clerk?
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor. Aye. Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are in closed session. But we got to use the mic so Mike can hear. Yes. Three. There you go. Hold on one second. Okay, we're good.
I know all you guys got your back.
Wait a minute, Peggy.
Yeah, it was green, it was blue, and then but now, then it turned red.
You want me to do it or you do it?